All right, everybody. This time we're going to focus on a different part of agriculture. So all year we've been talking about agriculture, so producing those livestock or those animals who provide us with food, as well as crops, those plants that we grow and then can turn into other products, whether that's, um, cotton that's grown in other parts of the country used for clothes, or wheat used for flour, and in Iowa, the corn and soybeans that we use for so many different products. But today we're going to talk a little bit about how agriculture has changed throughout time. Um, Historically, people have always had agriculture. It's like the oldest job in the history of the world, but it's done a lot differently now than it used to be. So we're going to start by just brainstorming what we think of when you hear agriculture. So I created a web, and I hope that you'll do this in your classroom on the board or maybe on your own piece of paper, however your teacher gives those directions. But in the center, I have the word agriculture. And then around this, we're going to write words that we think of when we think of agriculture. So I want you to come up with words that describe what we grow. What do we grow? What do we take care of? What do we use if we are farming? What equipment might be used? Or think of words that describe a farmer. Now, if I think of a farmer, the first person I think of is my dad. But instead of writing gray hair, glasses, don't tell him. Okay. Instead of writing those things, I'm going to write words to describe his job. So think of words that would describe the way a farmer is working. Okay, as we talk about change in agriculture, I want to start by pointing this out to you. In 1935, there were about 7 million farmers in the United States, but today there are only about 2 million. Now, 1935 seems like a long time ago, but my grandparents were alive at that time, and I would guess that you have family members or people, neighbors who were too. So it really wasn't that long ago. 7 million farmers, and we've cut that number by 5 million. Now, as our population grows, we have more people on Earth. We need to grow more food to feed them, but we have less land because more people need more space to live and to build infrastructure. So things like schools and stores and hospitals. More people means we need more things that are taking up land. Okay, we're going to start at the beginning of Iowa's timeline here. So if we go back before this was Iowa, 2,500,000,000 years ago, 2,500,000,000 years ago, glaciers were covering Iowa. Many of you learned this in second grade. So glaciers, like you've seen in the movie Ice Age, covered Iowa. People did not live here yet. And when they melted, they left behind minerals in the soil. And today, we still benefit because our soil began very rich, which meant that Native Americans had luck growing crops here. It was rich soil. And when you continue to grow crops and take care of them, you're taking care of your soil. And so over time, starting out with that good soil, we've continued to take care of it, and we still have very rich soil in Iowa. The first farmers to grow crops in Iowa were Native Americans. Now, they still hunted and fished for meat. They didn't have livestock, but they did learn how to grow crops, a lot of vegetables, things like squash and corn. But they only had farming tools that they could create. So they still didn't have things like plows that we'll see a little later. The next group of people to settle in this area were pioneers. When the first pioneers came to this area, Iowa was still not a state yet. Iowa became a state after it was purchased as part of the Louisiana Purchase. And so European settlers or pioneers started coming here. And pioneers lived on homesteads. So they had to build their own homes. They had to take care of any livestock and crops they needed for food. And they grew all the food their family needed. Sometimes people would share with neighbors if someone was close enough, but pioneers could not rely on getting to a grocery store. It might take you 2 or 3 days to get to the closest store and 2 or 3 days to get back home. So that's a trip most families didn't make very often, maybe a few times a year. But they did keep livestock and crops as well. Okay, so they were growing vegetables. Most of them had pigs. Pigs were the first livestock to be domesticated, and we'll talk more about that in another lesson. Some families had cows that they would keep for milk and then meat, and then possibly chickens or other livestock, but those would be most common. Okay, Iowa became a state in 1846, and around that time, farming was changing also. The first tractor was actually invented in Iowa. If you look at that picture, it was called the Waterloo Boy because it was invented in Waterloo. And having a tractor meant that people could grow more food because it didn't take as much manual labor. It was still a lot. They are not like the tractors we have today, but it required less physical labor so they could grow more food in the same amount of time. If you had more food than your family needed, you could sell it. And so farming became more of an occupation or a career and not something you had to do. You could also make the choice not to farm because now other people grew enough food that it was easier to buy it. Today, our inventions look a lot different. We have much larger tractors. They've been changing a lot since the 1950s, but today our tractors are so different from those in the 1950s also. If you look at the two pictures at the bottom there, on the right, that farmer is adjusting a GPS satellite signal. Okay, and in the left side, you see the screens that are inside that tractor. And teachers, I've sent a link to an awesome video that shows the use of that precision or that GPS technology. We also have seeds today that are developed to resist pests and weeds and to grow more food. Not all farmers choose to plant those, but most in Iowa do. Because of that technology and those changes, Iowa's farmers today produce more eggs, more ethanol, more pigs, and more corn than any other state. So Iowa leads the nation in a lot of agriculture venues, and a lot of that is due to our technology, but we've had farmers in Iowa since the first people were here. We've been farming this land, and it's really amazing the changes that have been made to today. If you are following along with the activity that I've shared with teachers, you are going to be using the information you got from the web and from that video, those images we looked at together. And your job is to pretend you are those different farmers throughout history. So I have this picture that looks kind of like a Twitter page, but it wouldn't have to be Twitter. You could think of any social media. So if you write a post, you know what kinds of things you're sharing. You might share a positive, a good thing that's happened. Maybe you would share a frustrating thing that happened. And farmers experience all those same things, good things, bad things, and in between. Your job is to write a post pretending you're each one of those farmers in history. So you would write one post as a Native American farmer, one post as a pioneer farmer, one as a farmer around the time they might have gotten their first tractor, and then one as a modern farmer. There are some directions at the top, but I want to remind you of two things. First, these have to be respectful, okay? Second, your posts need to show what you learned today. So if I wrote a post that said, I wish we had more rain, that could be any one of these farmers. At one time, all of those farmers have wished for rain, but it doesn't tell me anything about the time period. I want you to write posts that tell us something you learned about each time period today. So if I wrote a post that said, my horse broke its leg, I'm going to need some help plowing. Hopefully you know the only farmers who used horses and plows were pioneers, okay? Modern day farmers do not use horses for that purpose, and Native Americans did not use their horses for farming. They didn't have plows that were drawn by horses. So your posts need to tell us what you learned about those groups of people, and your teachers can give you a little help on that if you are following this activity. We'll see you. Okay, we are going to look at our web one more time, and this is the same web we started with, but on yours and on ours, we are going to eliminate anything that's just from the present. So we're going to take away words that would not have applied to farmers in the past. So as we look, we'll just go through ours. Corn, still grown and has been grown in Iowa.
Mhm.
Pigs were the first animals to be kept on farms, not just in Iowa, but all over the world. Cattle, they were used in the past as well, okay, for milk or meat. Hardworking, definitely. It's always been hard work. We've always needed soil. Dogs. What do you think on this one?
For working dogs, I
Yeah.
would say
They could stay.
stay.
They could
Yep.
stay. Working dogs are dogs that help herd cattle and sheep
And sheep herders. always
sheep
had
herders.
Dogs.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, if we move to the plow, the very first farmers did not have a plow. So Native Americans
They did not.
did not. They
No.
only had tools they could make with their own hands. So we're going to cross out plow. Even though it seems pretty old, the very first farmers didn't have that.
Mm-mm.
Tractors are
Nope.
also pretty new. Okay, vaccines
Vaccine.
that we give to our livestock, those are new. Okay, so we have to get rid of that one. They help keep our livestock herds healthy, but that's a new development, not something we've always had.
Mhm.
Combines are also new. Native Americans picked crops by hand. So did pioneers largely.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we look at this list, really the only things we've taken away are things that have to do with technology and modern medicine. Everything else is the same. Our farmers have always had the same job of providing food for the people around them, whether it's their family or their community or now the world. That's always been their job. Today it's just a little quicker, believe it or not, with all of that technology. Okay, so next time you see a farmer, thank them for all of their hard work.